One of President Trump's closest advisors can't seem to stay away from the spotlight. Between a chainsaw-wielding CPAC appearance to the promise of $5,000 Doge checks to Americans, he's been making lots of headlines recently. To break all of this down for us, we're joined now by Brett Samuels, White House reporter for The Hill. Brett, thanks for joining us. I want to start off this combo talking about Elon Musk. First, the U.S. Marshals Service has deputized members of his own private security detail, giving them broader rights and protections here. Can you walk us through the new power that they have and why?
Yeah, so essentially Elon Musk, as you mentioned, has been sort of everywhere around President Trump and around the White House the last month or so. This gives his personal security more rights, more flexibility. They can now carry weapons on federal grounds. They can follow him into certain government buildings. So certainly gives more power and more abilities, and also it would make the Federal Marshal Service liable should anything happen involving that security. So certainly a sign, I think, of Elon Musk's growing power.
Yeah, if he's getting all these additional protections, definitely. He also spoke at CPAC this week, and he's been under fire for a lot of the massive cuts that have been implemented across the federal government. Take a listen to what he had to say.
People ask, like, how can you find waste in DC? I'm like, look, it's like being in a room, and this target, the wall, the roofs, and the floor are all targets. So it's like, you're going to close your eyes and go shoot in any direction. you can't miss.
So you can see the showmanship is on full display there. At one point, it included a chainsaw that was presented by the Argentine president there on screen as well. Lots to digest, but ultimately, what's your biggest takeaway from his appearance at CPAC?
Yeah, Bianca, I think just the fact that he was at CPAC is very notable. Obviously, this is a conference that has had for years been sort of a place for more traditional Republicans, traditional conservatives, folks like Mike Pence or John Bolton, to speak at. And now Elon Musk is at this conference, sort of acting like a rock star. I think, the big takeaway is sort of just, I think this reflects sort of his stature, not just with Trump, but sort of within the Republican Party, that he is suddenly sort of this rock star kind of figure that people who support Trump also now really support and sort of revere Elon Musk. Yeah,
it reflects his role and also, like you said, the many changes in the Republican Party over the past, just past 5 years.
For sure.
One thing that he did touch on at CPAC is the idea of these Doge checks. Musk says that President Trump likes the idea of them. He didn't say that he explicitly signed on or anything, but we know that House Speaker Mike Johnson is apparently not on board with them. So can we expect anything to come of this idea?
Yeah, I think we've learned a lot sort of about this idea of these Doge checks in the last couple of days, where you had Trump say that he likes the idea of taking some of the savings that Doge finds, giving them to the public, using some to pay down the debt. But as you mentioned, Mike Johnson is sort of against the idea of sending out checks. He wants to just pay down the debt. And ultimately, the Trump White House has said that this will be worked out in the reconciliation process, which of course is being handled by Congress. So if the Speaker of the House is sort of drawing a line in the sand about these checks, I think that's a pretty good indication that we may not ultimately see them go out.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if anything really does happen with that. But speaking of budgeting, the budget resolution in the Senate recently, became underway. What does this mean for the Trump agenda moving forward? Is that going to help any sort of legislation move forward faster? I mean, what can we expect from the Senate?
Yeah, certainly. So the Senate passing this budget resolution after this all-night voting session, essentially, I think what we can view this Senate plan as is almost a backup plan for the White House. President Trump has said he prefers the House version, which includes, sort of his entire agenda in one big bill. Senate version is breaking this up into two bills. So, but the Senate pushed forward despite that anyway. So I think what that tells us is that, the Trump White House and Republicans on the Hill certainly want this sort of backup plan in case the House version does fall through.
Right, and in addition to the House and the Senate, the president spoke with GOP governors earlier this morning. What did he have to say to them about his agenda and the next 4 years?
Yeah, certainly. I think this was, as we saw sort of a lot when the president in the White House marked his first month in office, he used this speech to Republican governors as sort of a victory lap to tout all that he had done in his first month in office, signing off on executive orders, cracking down on immigration, reorienting foreign policy toward Ukraine, and certainly then he hosted governors from both parties at the White House on Friday morning, and that was again sort of a victory lap for him, calling out cabinet confirmations. So certainly Trump in, I think, a good mood and eager to sort of tout all his achievements in his first month.
Well, one of the many changes his administration is trying to implement is changing the name of Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America, but news organizations are not applying the standard proposed by his administration, including Newsmax and Fox News. Are you at all surprised that either of those organizations are saying that they're not going to abide by this suggestion?
Yeah, so what we saw Newsmax and Fox News were among these organizations who signed on to a letter sort of backing the Associated Press, which of course has been punished because it, as you mentioned, is saying that it's not just going to call this the Gulf of America. It will continue to call it the Gulf of Mexico while recognizing this executive order. And those organizations obviously have this reputation for being more conservative, certainly, and being Trump's preferred news outlets. So the fact that they're backing the Associated Press, I think, is definitely notable and a sign that maybe news organizations are aware that it's sort of a slippery slope to punish one outlet for their choice of word or choice of speech.
Yeah.
Who knows after the AP what outlet could be next.
That's a good point. Well, Trump also says that he's headed to Fort Knox, which is the military base in Kentucky that also serves as the home to most of our country's gold reserves. He says he's going to make sure that none of it has been stolen, even though his own Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, says it's all there. So can you explain what this is about?
Yeah, this is something, circling back to where we started, Elon Musk is sort of where this all began, where it was floated on social media, this idea of, does anybody really know if all the gold is there, if any of the gold has gone missing? Republican senators like Rand Paul and Mike Lee kind of piled onto this. And lo and behold, now we have President Trump saying he's going to go to Fort Knox to sort of inspect it and check out the gold reserves. So, this is sort of a secretive facility that people don't often sort of get a look inside. As you mentioned, the Secretary of the Treasury himself said there's an annual audit, that the gold is all there, but certainly would make for an interesting photo op and sort of a messaging opportunity for Trump if you were to go down there to Kentucky to sort of take a look and invite cameras or lawmakers inside.
Right, and around all those bars of gold. White House reporter Brett Samuels, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Illegal crossings at the southern border are down 94% from the same period last year, according to Border Patrol Chief Mike Banks. NewsNation's Jorge Ventura joins us from San Antonio, Texas, with the latest on the Trump administration's crackdown on illegal immigration.
I was just recently on the South Texas border in Eagle Pass and Del Rio, and that was an area that under the Biden administration on some days saw thousands of migrants cross illegally. Now Border Patrol agents say around this same time last year, they were averaging around 4,800 migrant crossings per day. That number has completely plummeted and now is averaging less than 300 migrant encounters for the entire southern border. In that area of Eagle Pass and Del Rio, now averaging less than 50 migrant encounters per day. And it's a combination of Trump's latest executive orders cracking down on illegal immigration, ending the catch and release program where migrants were paroled into the country after crossing illegally, the reinstatement of the Remain in Mexico policy, but also the messaging on mass deportations is working in terms of deterring illegal immigration. Now, according to U.S. Border Patrol officials, groups of migrants in Mexico are now choosing to return back to the home countries rather than continuing their journey up north to the U.S. border. Migrants did cite the heavy security along the border and Mexico's containment efforts. Sources in Mexico telling NewsNation that since Trump ended that CBP-1 program, hundreds of migrants have left Mexican border towns and started to return home. This also comes as Border Patrol has now officially deputized for the first time ever Texas National Guard troops under Title 8 to expand their law enforcement authority on the southern border. So for the first time ever, Texas National Guard troops can now detain and arrest migrants who are crossing into the U.S. legally, now providing another layer of support for Border Patrol agents here on the ground. This also comes as U.S. authorities here are now making more of an aggressive push to crack down on drug smuggling rings here in the United States. In Phoenix, a months-long investigation dubbed Operation Double Down took down a major transnational drug ring, moving fentanyl, meth, heroin, and cocaine straight from Mexico and into Arizona. Authorities say that the cartel-linked network smuggled carloads of drugs from border cities like Nogales and San Luis into Phoenix on a weekly basis. That operation led to the seizure of nearly 2 million fentanyl pills pills, hundreds of pounds of meth and cash. 25 suspects now face charges after state prosecutors secured arrest warrants. Investigators say this drug network was also tied to smuggling routes in Mexico and other states like New Mexico and Colorado. And here in South Texas, Border Patrol agents recently intercepted over 120 pounds of cocaine in just one day, stopping 3 separate smuggling attempts worth more than $1 million. Officers say that the drugs were hidden in passenger vehicles flagged by K9 teams. And according to my sources in Mexico, with that crackdown by President Trump on the southern border, say that cartels are now more focused on smuggling and invading law enforcement officials more than ever. So expect for those drug smuggling and migrant smuggling attempts to really ramp up here in Texas in the coming weeks. Back to you.
NewsNation's Jorge Ventura, thanks so much. The Democratic Party is looking to reach voters of all political ideologies after recent electoral losses. NewsNation chief Washington correspondent and host of The Hill, Blake Berman, has more on the first steps of their game plan and what Republican Party leadership looks like these days.
The Democratic Party launching a new strategy. I'm Blake Berman, host of The Hill on NewsNation. Democrats are starting to regroup after their loss in November. The newly elected chair of the Democratic National Committee, Ken Martin, is kicking off his tenure with a quote-unquote organizing everywhere tour, speaking with voters in the red states of Texas and Missouri, the swing states of Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, and the blue state of Illinois. His goal, he says, is to get the DNC out of Washington, D.C. In a memo, Martin said that Democrats need to portray themselves as the party of the worker and that, quote, union workers and labor leaders will be core to my decision-making, end quote. On the other side of the aisle, the RNC is still being run by Michael Whatley after Republicans pulled off the governing trifecta in November and President Trump decided to keep him in his post. I'm Blake Berman, and this is the NewsNation Political Minute.
You can find more news and analysis from Blake and our colleagues 24/7 on NewsNation. To find NewsNation on your screen, go to joinnn.com. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Bianca Facchinei. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to The Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.